Hi, everybody. Today we're going to talk about scheduling audits. So, how do you create an audit schedule? But before I get into scheduling an audit, you need to make sure you understand the difference between what an audit agenda is and an audit schedule. Don't get those two confused because they're very different. Number one, an agenda. The agenda is what you're going to do for this audit. So, when you're doing an audit, you need to know who's going to do the audit, who the auditee is, what the location is, what the process is, what the criteria is for the audit, how long it's going to be, what the sequences of processes are going to be. If it's a team audit, which auditors are going to do which processes, when your opening meeting is, when your closing meeting is. That's an agenda. That's the details of a single audit, whether it's a single process audit, a group of processes, or your full quality system audit. That's the agenda. Now, for an audit schedule, that's higher level. A high level audit schedule is going to give you what you're going to be doing for audits this year or even longer than a year. It's not a bad idea to have it for longer than a year. So not only do you have this audit that's going to be coming up today or tomorrow, but also next year. So you're always planning at least a year ahead. So there's never a gap where you don't have the next audit scheduled. And you can always move these around. You can always change these. In fact, I recommend that you review your audit schedule, the year plus plan with your management review team, so top management has an input on, we really ought to spend more time on this process and less time on that process. That's the kind of feedback that you should be getting from top management. And we keep on getting the same feedback from the same auditor. Maybe we ought to switch things up a little bit this year and have a different person take a look at things. Or, there's that new guidance from the FDA, and maybe we ought to spend a little bit more time looking at that particular process to make sure we're compliant. Oh, we just made a change to our MRP system. Let's audit that. Oh, we just added a new warehouse. Let's have somebody spend some time looking at that. These are the kinds of things that could be at the individual agenda level, or they could be at the schedule level, but you want to have top management making some of those decisions in the management reviews and documenting it, and then make your schedule reflect that, and then pass that same information down to the individual lead auditor that's making out the agenda for their audits. So here's my 6 steps that I like to consider when I'm trying to come up with a schedule for the company's year plus audit plan or audit schedule. Number 1, what were the results of last year? So you're supposed to consider the results of previous audits and the importance of areas. So this is really important. What did we have problems in last time? What did we do really well in last time? The areas that we did well in and consistently do well, we can spend less time on those areas, not skip them entirely, but we can spend less time on those areas and focus on the areas that have CAPAs, that we need to do effectiveness checks for, or processes that have had changes recently, particularly areas with changes. Now, if you're going to look at the results of last year, don't just look at your internal audits, look at customer audits if you had a customer come and audit you, and also look at FDA inspection reports, even if it was 2 years ago, and especially if it's 2 years ago, because they might be coming in anytime soon. And then also look at your certification body audits. So you want to look at all 3 of those, the internal audits, the FDA, and the certification bodies, all of them across, as well as the customers, so all 4. Once you have considered the results of the previous audits, now you want to look at what are the most important areas. Cover your most important areas first. So the problem children, cover those first. The processes you just implemented a CAPA for, do those first. So that's really what you want to do. You don't want to spend all your time, don't want to spend the same amount of time on every process. Don't want to spend all your time on manager review just because that's in the early sections of the standard. So it's section 4. And a lot of people like to start with manager review to get an overview of the process of your quality system. But no, spend some time on the most important areas first. And then whatever's left over, you could cover all together as an audit. That's a really great strategy to make sure that you have the best people doing the most important audits first, and then do a full quality system audit to cover everything else as sort of a comprehensive audit, all done by one person. So that way you're almost auditing certain areas twice. Why? Because they need it. They're the most important. They're the areas that are important from, like, if it's a final inspection and release of product, that would be an area, or it's an area where you had nonconformities in the past. The next thing you want to consider, so we've said the results of previous audits, we've said whatever processes are the most important. The third thing that you want to consider in your schedule is who's going to do your audit. So it could be done internally, it could be done externally. Externally, you hire a consultant. Internally, you have one of your trained, qualified lead auditors in the company. They could do it. Both are possibilities, and you can use a mixture of them, and you can alternate. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, so you decide how you want to do that. You could even be simulating, oh, this year we have a recertification audit with BSI. We're going to have 2 auditors from BSI in. Let's prepare our team for that scenario. Normal, we're used to just one person. Let's purposely have 2 people tag teaming together to see how we react when we spread our resources thin to support the audit. So that's a really good strategy to simulate that so you're prepared. See what works, see what doesn't, and then make adjustments. So now that we know who's going to do the audit, now we have to decide how long. And I know because I'm the consultant a lot of time putting together the proposals, they want it to be as cheap as possible. Well, if you want it to be cheap as possible, you probably shouldn't be hiring one of the best consultants you can find out there. If you want it to be cheap, look in the yellow pages, find somebody cheap, ask a friend, is there somebody really cheap that you know of that can do this audit? If that's what you want is cheap, go find cheap. But if you want good, if you really want somebody to improve your quality system and make sure you do really well and you're prepared for those FDA inspections and certification audits, then get somebody good. But you got to decide what you're trying to do here. Am I just trying to barely meet the requirements? Now, one of the instructions might be, I'm going to hire a really good auditor, but I'm only going to give them a day to work on this because I want to just barely meet the requirements. Now, if that's your goal, I understand. I've been there. I've even recommended some companies, we don't have a lot of time here before your next certification audit. Let's just get an auditor to do this. And that might be a great time to say, let's keep the cost really low. Let's have a good auditor do this, but we're going to tell them, all I want is an audit that meets the requirements, day and a half, if you can get away with doing a day and a half, and do it all remotely. Okay, they'll do that. It's not what I recommend, but if you only have a week to go before your next certification audit, it gets the job done. So you decide what the duration is going to be. But the best scenario is to spend more time on the areas that are important and do those in small process audits throughout the year. And then maybe about 4 months before you're going to have your certification audit, do a full quality system audit to make sure that everything's covered. But you really put the detail and the importance up front on doing single process audits so the auditor can focus on that process and give it as much time as it needs. The fifth thing that I look at is whether this is going to be a full or a partial audit. I've mentioned a couple of times about full quality system audits. Now, when I think of a full quality system audit, it's going to be a multi-day event, and I'm going to cover all the processes. Somebody left a comment here. Just want to say thank you for the information you provide. You're very welcome. And if you have a topic that you can suggest, please put it in the comments below when this is done. That would be very helpful. So getting back to full versus partial, I think of a full quality system audit being multiple days. When you're doing a full quality system audit, you're trying to cover all the clauses of the standard. Now, could you make a rationale for, I'm going to skip some clauses this year and I'm going to cover them next year? Yes, you could. Some of the notified bodies will accept that. Not all of them will. I've had some say, no, you have to cover all the clauses every year. But I'm seeing more and more as things have changed with COVID, where we got into more remote auditing. We're seeing companies be more successful with making cases for only doing partial quality system audits and skipping processes where there haven't been any problems. But in general, what you expect is you see all the processes are going to get audited. And for a small company with only a handful of people, you really have trouble getting independence. So It's hard to have an internal person audit anything because they touch so many processes. They're pretty much always auditing their own work. So you bring in an outsider and you say, just do the whole audit. We're going to get this over with and done with so we can get back to work. I understand that. That's fine. But if you have a process you've changed or you're having problems with an area, have somebody do an audit of just that process to see if their changes and corrective actions are effective. It could be as short as 90 minutes. 90 minutes is worth the investment. Have somebody review your CAPA process remotely if you had a CAPA for your CAPA process, or you're having problems with complaint handling. Have somebody audit complaint handling. In 90 minutes of a Zoom session, you can cover a lot of ground and give them a lot of records, and they can interview you, and they can even give you advice at the end. They can give you a report and give you advice. It's an internal audit. You're allowed to give advice as an internal auditor. So I highly recommend these small process audits, but it really also helps a small company with limited resources just to have somebody come in and do a full quality system audit once a year. And you want to do it a few months before your certification audits so you have time to open up CAPAs before the certification body comes in. Now, the sixth thing that I look for is this going to be remote or is this going to be on site? Now, if the processes that I'm looking at, the records that I'm looking at are done in an office or in a conference room, there's absolutely no reason why I can't do this remotely because I don't need to know what the office looks like and I don't need to know what the conference room looks like. It's not going to add any value. So manager review, CAPA processes, complaint handling. I could review all of those processes because they're administrative processes remotely. So you can save yourself a lot of travel funds when you're hiring outside auditors by doing those processes remotely. You just got to make sure the records are available remotely as well. So upload them or share them on your screen. There's nothing preventing you from sharing it on a Zoom screen. Just share your screen. Boom. You don't even have to scan some of these documents. And I've had people have little stands that they put up and they put it up in front of the camera. Like I can do this. You can't really read my handwriting, but you can read the document. You can see what I wrote here. So you say, just hold it up, put it on a stand so it's not moving while I'm seeing it, put it in front of the camera, have another camera that is the person speaking. So 2 cameras. That will work. Little Joby tripod in your cell phone, you're good to go. And that'll give you the ability to show documents that you haven't even scanned. And you can turn the page in the document, flip it over. Okay, here's the next page. Here's the next page. Walk them through it. So it is possible even for manual paper-based systems to do that. Now that you've done the remote audits for the processes that are 100% administrative, then you can do on-site audits and spend the travel resources on the processes where it matters. So if I've got incoming inspection and I'm using calibrated devices, or if I'm doing manufacturing processes and I'm assembling and performing tests, if I want to have somebody look at a warehouse and see the general condition of the warehouse, these are things that there's some actual real value for being on site. But if you outsource your manufacturing and everything's done in a conference room or an office, everything's administrative, there's really no value whatsoever to doing an on-site audit. And the whole world is very comfortable with doing remote audits since COVID. So I highly recommend considering where the activities are performing, and that should really drive your decision whether it's going to be something that is remote or on-site. Now, is the communication and the focus of everybody usually better when you're on site and you have the auditor in front of you? Yes. You don't bring an outsider to come into your office and then leave them in the conference room and not pay attention. It's kind of hard to check your emails and ignore the auditor when they're sitting 3 feet away from you. And people do a really good job of that sometimes on Zoom just by not sharing their camera or not having it pointed at them. So you got to make sure that the people that are involved are paying attention or they're not going to get what they need out of this. So that's the 6 things that I look for when I'm trying to create a schedule for the company. And keep in mind, like I said at the beginning, that's not the same as an agenda. An agenda would be the step-by-step, what sequence of things I'm going to have, what criteria, other things like that. Who are going to be the team members, who's assigned to what. That's another lesson for another day, another video. But I hope this tells you, helps you plan your own schedule for the year. You do not need to have 1 hour for every single process, and you don't have to have all single process audits in one per month. You can do them all at once, and you can do a mixture of that. And I hope this video gives you some ideas. If it was helpful to you, please click on the like. And if you know of somebody on your team that needs some help scheduling their audit for the year or the company's audit for the year, please share the link with them, and hopefully this will help them come up with a better audit schedule. And it's not a bad idea to maybe ask your management team to take a few minutes and watch this short video so they know what they're supposed to be thinking about when they come up with suggestions for the audit for next year, the audit schedule for next year. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.